Hello and welcome to Conversations from the ANF podcast. In this episode we speak to adoptive parent Eliza. She shares her experience of adoption with her partner and her experience of good support as she's trying to coordinate contact with her child's large sibling group, who are all living in different permanency arrangements. As always, if you've experience of adoption, fostering or special guardianship from any perspective, personal or professional, and would like to share that on the podcast, please get in touch through either the Facebook page, the Twitter page, or you can email us at anfpodcast@gmail.com.
I am Eliza and I'm 46. And we adopted, so my partner and I, who've been together for more than a quarter of a century, adopted a little boy who was 2.5 in 2018. And we had been on quite a long journey towards adoption. It wasn't a fertility journey. It was a bit of a... Well, I think we'd made a sort of more a decision either to adopt or not have children, in terms of quite lots of different reasons, but it had been quite a long-standing agreement, and I was actually living abroad in the late part of my 30s, and so I kind of came back, and then we started this adoption journey, and which throughout I thought wasn't really going to happen for some reason. Just didn't think it was. I just thought, I'm 42. I'm not going to be a parent. And there's lots going on, and I'm kind of fairly comfortable and happy. And the adoption process just seemed like an endless set of questions as to what would you do when your child is screaming? What would you do when you're feeling depressed? What would you do? And I just thought, I can't really relate to this. And and most of the people on the course either they just seem more, I say, committed than us. And so, but we did get sort of nudged through, and I was committed. I really desperately wanted to be a parent, but I think I'm not someone who kind of necessarily expects to get what they want. So I just, and then we had quite a long process after the approval, where they had changed the system to a more of a kind of link maker, where we were expected to be more proactive than we had when we had entered the process, because there was a change in how they did it. And I think we weren't really prepared for that change. And I just found link maker completely alienating. I couldn't go on it without getting a kind of PTSD looking at those profiles and just feeling awful. So we weren't actually able to be very proactive, and we kept saying we'd just like to wait for the local authority to give us a child if there was one that was suitable. And that didn't happen because we live in the area of town where we were always too close to the birth relatives. So eventually we had an amazing social worker who just sort of kicked us around the corner in the end, and basically did link maker. And the very first child we were proactive about that she had found on LinkMaker was our child. And it just rolled completely. Everyone was delighted. It was just a really straightforward and really, beautiful experience. And I couldn't believe that the government had given me a 2-year-old, and I got to get off work and just hang around in the park and just be happy and do stupid 2-year-old things. It's really lovely experience for me. And I think it's remained something that's really transformative for me and my partner, and given us another 25 years. Right. Together, because I think we had done a long time. We had done living apart, being together. We kind of done a lot of stuff, but I felt like this has been so renewing, and our and so funny, and to see someone grow up, you kind of live your life again. So I've loved being a parent. But from I suppose from my child's point of view, one of the reasons I wanted to do this podcast, and one of the reasons I do listen to the podcast a lot, is that my child has a lot of siblings, and we adopted only him, and so I follow a lot of the debates about should siblings stay together or not together, but that doesn't really seem to apply in a case where it's a huge sibling group. And I think a lot about them, and always have. I kind of grieve for them a little bit, and we do have contact with one. She's incredibly fraught, although I think we've got to a really good place. It's just that we have been on a bit of a journey with it. And the reason I thought it would be worth sharing is I imagined that there are other people out there kind of on this journey. And about a year ago, I was thinking, anyway, a year ago, we were in a point where we had sent letters through letterbox. And that had been working quite well, because we'd been getting letters from older siblings who are in the care system. And my child's social worker texted me and said, I'm about to go on maternity leave, but they didn't get through because they haven't got them. And so I knew you would send them and you haven't. And so, but follow up, because it's all a mess.
Yeah.
So I started following up, and I just sort of couldn't get through. I think they were actually looking in the wrong office.
Yeah.
And so I have a friend who's a care leaver, and he's from a large sibling group as well. And he's a bit unusual in some ways, but he works with care leavers. And I said, what do we I feel my child's happiness and his longing for the tribe. He feels like he's been thrown out, and I don't really understand I understand the professional decision making that took place prior to his adoption. But we're now in a universe where in 4 or 5 years' time, they're all going to be in touch.
Yeah.
And so we don't want to get to that point where we look like we've been kind of withholding something so, I can't, I rang adoption support in our local authority saying, because we are a different local authority. And so I rang our local authority, and a very, very nice social worker on the phone said, you have to help him grieve. And I started to cry when she said that. I was like, oh. And I think she misunderstood why I was crying. She said something else, but I was like, and I just put down the phone and I thought, why would you fucking grieve? Sorry, excuse my language. But why would you grieve for someone who's alive and well and like living in a couple of hours away? Like, that just seems, I know we're told, that our children have come from I know that we can't rebuild what they have, what they had, and what they've lost. But it's just totally our little boy is saying something quite clear, which is people he wants to see. And to me, that they as individuals, whatever their contact arrangements are, they are not dangerous or harmful necessarily.
Yeah.
Talk to me in a year, because we've been on a bit of a journey since then. So my friend said you should go to the Care Leavers Council, because they're made up of care leavers, and you can just say. So I went to the I googled Care Leaver Council from his local authority, and someone answered and I said, there's a whole load of children and they're losing touch with each other right now because you've lost all their letters. And nobody can, after sort of 6 weeks of trying, I can't get anyone to ring me back or go and look for the letters. And so I had an email from Director of Children's Services the next day. So that was interesting how effectively that worked. He wrote back to me on Boxing Day. It was like, I'm going to have a meeting. This is appalling.
Yeah.
I may have slightly overshot, in terms of my advocacy abilities. So that seemed so within 3 days, they found the letters. So anybody out there with lost letters, that I don't know what these councils are, but they seem to be very effective. So they found the letters, but we also then kind of started a consultation with Adoption Connect, and we had a very different kind of social worker who's much like could be one of my child siblings. It made me feel really old that anyone that looks so young could be. I've only met her on Skype. It's just could be a qualified human, but she's been absolutely amazing. She immediately was like, yeah, they all need to see each other, don't they? And I said, well, throughout the adoption process, we said we were really open to contact, and we were told it wasn't possible. And then it sort of took 6 months to get an email back from the children's new social worker. And then we kind of run into a roadblock, which is that we've kind of trying to bring everyone along on our side of this enormous artificial wall. Yeah. So other adults, other children needed time to adjust.
Yeah.
And for good reasons. And children who've had different experiences.
Yeah.
And different priorities and different relationship to the whole edifice of the family. But somehow in October, we kind of said, we've pressed pause once in the summer, now we're going to press play.
Wow.
And amazingly, the other adults involved were like, yeah, okay. They're like, it could be kind of disastrous, but what has since happened is that we know that the foster carers of one of the siblings, where we're going to start, are really keen.
Right.
I feel really emotional about it. So we're going to have a meeting. We, as a couple, as adoptive parents, are going to have a meeting with them. And I cannot wait for the day when I can just cut social services out of the loop, so I don't have to keep going through all these emails and people and backwards and forwards, because I don't have, people can only share information according to the GDPR kind of agreement.
Yeah.
I don't have a right to know about my child's siblings and what they're up to and how they're getting on and whether they have a relationship with their parents, which could be fundamentally dangerous to my child. And I'm not allowed to know that. So we're just like literally feel like we talk to someone in an outsourced agency who's actually been brilliant, but then has this kind of job to do.
Yeah.
Who getting through her hierarchy and then through the social, get back to the social. And what I suppose I feel has been really the gap is someone like, so my child had really, really good professionals looking after him. He had a great family father. He had a wonderful social worker. He had a really nice IRO who chatted when it was all kind of contested. And, I had a long chat to her. She was at the review meeting. So it wouldn't cost it would cost far less than it has to keep that IRO on for an annual check-in with those kids, to give us a phone call once a year, to give us the information in an appropriate way, to say, okay, big, huge sibling group. Logistically, contact is going to be really complicated because they're everywhere. And there were really good reasons, as far as I understand, to make it a separate thing. They weren't a group that could have been kept together. They tried. with certain configuration, but a couple of configurations, but the impact of what had happened meant that the people who made that decision, not me, felt that they all needed their own family in the end.
Can I mean, it's fascinating. Excuse me. It's fascinating, how this is all sort of transformed. But can I ask, prior, go right back to the beginning, prior to sort of taking on your little boy and adopting your little boy, what had been your thoughts around sort of contact and ongoing family links? Had it even been in the frame, or was it something that you'd been sort of...
Yeah, it's a really good question. I mean, I had been a teacher, a primary school teacher, and what had inspired me to adopt, I think, rather than try and have our own family, was a couple of experiences with children who I had taught, either going into care and seeing that transformation to the positive, that just being looked after, and what a difference that makes. And so I think I had from there, and another child who had been, the kind of case you see in the newspaper, and he'd landed in my class from another county.
That's really interesting. Because so often coming into care is always seen as wholly negative, and of course that is it is a negative. But then for you to have actually seen the tangible physical benefits for a child is interesting, isn't it? Because that does feel like it's even you saying those words feels like, you don't hear that story very often, do you?
I think it's really like the case we just talk it down all the time. So I had thought maybe we would foster, and I thought, and knowing what I had what I knew about the sort of system, and knowing us as a couple, I thought we might be better suited to fostering, but I also didn't want to because I didn't want to be bossed around. I didn't want to not have control over the family in my life. I just don't. Having been a teacher again as well, you've interacted quite. You sort of have a sense of what it's like. So what it's like to really love children. I loved all the children I taught. I wasn't always the best teacher, but I loved them. I did really. They were very well. No, none of them really. So I kind of, really thought the best of all of them. But I thought, but you hand them on, so you hold them in a certain place because they're not yours.
Yeah.
And I suppose there was this other part of me that just wanted my child. And so that being said, I think I hadn't thought about this whole sibling thing, except we were only ever really probably going to adopt one child, because I think that's what my partner was really up for as well. I was like, yes, but he was just much more ambivalent. And so, to be honest, I couldn't work out how it would. That was why I sat in the adoption process just thinking, this is not actually going to happen, because I just thought all of this just sounds so intimidating and so just mad. It just sounds mad. I mean, letterbox contacts as a concept is quite insane. When it actually happens and you're sitting in the middle of lockdown and you get these letters from rather kind of beautiful teenagers full of love, it's a bit of a boost, and it actually, it's okay. You sort of see what the reality is and how even small connects are really important or could be really positive. But I think when you're at the beginning, I just thought, this sounds completely mad and completely awful. I suppose what has taken me a long time to kind of sit with is just how awful it was. I think when I felt sort of really sorry for my child's parents or his wider family. And I found that sympathy over the years has just dropped away. because my sympathies are with him, and I think they damaged him and they harmed him. So I think fundamentally there's a kind of emotional shift away from just feeling like, oh my God, when we got him, I was like, how could you lose this this beautiful person, this pride of any, to have just created him so wonderful as he is, and then to lose him and have the state take him away. And I suppose what's happened is that I've become more belligerent about my own child and what, I do, but within that, in his I suppose his needs have become more obvious to me. He's become bigger.
Yeah. Well, no, that's interesting. You've articulated that really interestingly, sort of that empathy and compassion for them has ebbed away, but which you would then expect that the desire for contact would maybe go with it. But actually, in some ways, as you've focused in on your son's needs, you've seen that actually the contact it benefits him. I want to be my child's friend, whether I'm a good parent or not. I would like him to think that we did the best we could. And if we don't sort this out now, he is not going to think that, and he shouldn't, because we'll have just been lazy, and it would be easy to do nothing. It would be easy to go, well, the care plan was set the way it was. But what does that mean? That means when he's 13, he's going, or 10, or how it, I don't really know already exactly what he's doing on the tablet. But don't know. I know exactly what he's doing on the tablet. But I know what you're saying, don't worry.
He's going to find him. He's going to find them. He has whether it or not, and I don't think any young person in the world is going to say, oh, I think it was just better that, put that behind us. And they might do when they're older, and I would like him to be. I think it's quite good that he does have family to retreat to and to say, okay, actually, this is all really emotionally harmful. But I don't expect that he will. So I would really like to start to get a handle on it. And I also think it could be massively positive or negative or both, or just turbulent. I just don't know how the next year is going to go. But
it's
but we told him a while ago, you want to see your older siblings. We want you to see your older siblings. We're trying. But I feel it's taken a long, long time.
And the reality is that families are complicated. Well, regardless, families are complicated. And so it's not going to be this sort of peachy, Disney-esque recreation of family, is it? Can I ask you then your reflections on the system itself? Obviously you've in some ways been pushing upstream against a system that was designed to go one way, and you're sort of saying, we want to do something different. We want to do, and so have you talked about some of the stuff, obviously having to write a letter, which has got a fantastic response. But what about the other professionals, the post-adoption support? Has there been, mixed views, or what are people saying to you?
So I think there is a split in social work about the importance of contact.
Right.
So I think, the difference between, say, the support we've had here, which has been really, really, really good. I mean, what I kind of have rung in a really bad place in the summer and got a conversation with somebody who really made me think differently about kind of sensory issues, and has helped us, so actually really good support on the issue of do you open the door again to potentially really complex and drama-filled family politics when you shut that door to open it again. you're literally looking to the other side. It's like a void. I don't know what the consequences of our actions are exactly. It could be a massive brouhaha at our school, could be our address being shared around, family members. So some people had told me, like, that could be disastrous. And so there's definitely one train of thought that says, and it's interesting because that's been from our local authority.
Right.
I actually think from his local authority through the outsourced agency, they are actually in a different place because they know the situation. They actually have the information.
Right.
And so they seem to be quite more confident. or just not, but so for instance, a concern was expressed, how do we know this won't end up with someone knowing our address and blah, blah, blah. And we just kind of got a one-line email back saying the social worker will tell the children not to ask their addresses. Right, well, how do you do that? And it would it'd be supervised contact. And I'm like, well, I tell you, my child, he is going to walk into any room and tell you his full name and address. And if we were to tell him not to do that, he's much more likely to do it. So that's just, these humans, and they've been, so then they have, they for whatever reason, and it's quite hard to, my child was 18 months when he left. Yeah, so but he has this. But I would imagine as well, if I was living and I was adopted, I'd been to all this stuff, and then I got these letters, and they're these kind of quite cool looking, and they love me, and they're doing exciting things, and that is a big. And then other people at school are saying, well, I've got brothers and sisters. Do you have brothers and sisters? And he's like, and he made up a huge number, like I had 42 brothers and sisters. I was like, okay, so that just needs to be addressed. It's a big, and so I suppose in system terms, we think about risks of action, but we don't think about risks of inaction. I think you've brought it up on your podcast before. To me, that's really, and I think there's just an information piece. Like his IRO knew the whole family.
Yeah.
I just don't see why she couldn't be hired for a day a year to find out what's going on and hold the family piece for the kids.
Yeah.
Instead of hundreds of different adults with different, and with different children and different concerns, doing exams or not getting on between one sibling or having contact with birth parents or not having contact with birth parents, or, so everyone we're 4.5 years after, we're 5 years after the original care plan was made. So when does it get updated? Are we literally sitting around waiting for our children to find each other on the internet? Is that really the solution from a system point of view to the kids getting together and going, they're all assholes?
Yeah, the professionals, that is.
I mean,
yeah.
And the parents,
right. It's lots of really good questions, and I think, and you're not the only person. I speak to a lot of people, and a lot of people express that a lot of adoptive parents are very quietly pushing the system upstream. They're going against the flow, and I think that it's really interesting to hear your perspective and your experience as well. And we need a system that's retooled for this contemporary world, don't we? I would love to get you back on, and we'll maybe get part 2 and maybe part 3 by the sounds of it, because you.
Yeah, sure.
Well, thank you so much, Eliza. It's really been a pleasure to speak to you, and I wish you well. And I'd love to know how you get on with your arrangements. So messages, and we'll keep people updated, because I think people are genuinely really interested in how this plays out for families.
Yeah, good. Thanks.
Thank you. Bye bye.